Hollywood pauses. A familiar face is gone. Robert Carradine has died at 71. The actor who rode into legend in The Long Riders. The unlikely hero of Revenge of the Nerds. The warm, steady father in Lizzie McGuire. For decades, he moved between grit and heart, comedy and courage. His name became part of pop culture history. But behind the roles was a journey few truly knew. What shaped the man audiences grew up watching? What moments defined his legacy? Stay with us as we look back at the life, the impact, and the unforgettable presence of Robert Carradine. Behind the headlines, behind the tributes from fans and colleagues, there is a home that feels unbearably quiet. For Robert Carradine's wife, his children, and his grandchildren, the loss is not measured in film credits or red carpets. It is measured in empty chairs at the dinner table, in the silence where his laughter once echoed, in the small, ordinary moments that now feel impossibly heavy. To the world, he was a gifted performer. To them, he was the steady presence who called just to check in. The grandfather who knelt down to listen closely to every story, no matter how small. The father whose advice was thoughtful, patient, and often wrapped in humor. His family described him as their bedrock, the one who grounded everyone else. When life felt uncertain, Bobby, as they lovingly called him, was the constant. His older brother, Keith Carradine, spoke with a mixture of heartbreak and pride. He wanted the world to understand that Robert's life was not defined by its final chapter. It was defined by courage. For nearly 2 decades, Robert lived with bipolar disorder. It was a battle that demanded strength in ways few could see. Some days were bright and full of energy. Others were shadowed by a weight that words cannot fully capture. Yet through it all, he kept showing up for the people he loved. The family's statement carried both grief and purpose. They called him a beacon of light in a world that can feel so dark. That was not poetic exaggeration. It was their lived reality. Even during his most difficult seasons, Robert had a way of making others feel seen. He listened without judgment. He embraced people with complete acceptance. He was tolerant, wise, and disarmingly funny. That humor, Keith said, is what they will cling to now. The quick smile, the perfectly timed joke, the way he could dissolve tension in a room with a single line. But there was also exhaustion. Years of navigating a serious mental health condition take a toll, not only on the individual, but on everyone who loves them. The family acknowledged his valiant struggle openly. They wanted there to be no shame, no whispers, no stigma. Bipolar disorder is an illness, they emphasized. It is not a weakness. It is not a failure of character. Robert fought it with the same bravery he brought to his roles. Yet some battles are more complex than anyone on the outside can truly understand. For his wife and children, the grief is layered. They mourn the man who tucked them in at night, the man who offered steady guidance when life felt overwhelming. They mourn the future birthdays he will not attend, the milestones he will not witness in person. Grandchildren will grow up with stories instead of new memories. Photographs will become treasures. Old voice messages will feel priceless. At the same time, there is deep gratitude. Gratitude that they had him for 71 years. Gratitude for the lessons he taught simply by being himself. He showed them how to persevere, how to remain kind in a world that often rewards hardness, how to speak openly about mental health even when it feels uncomfortable. His journey, they hope, will encourage others to seek help without fear of judgment, to talk, to listen, to stand beside loved ones who are struggling. Keith's words carried a brother's tenderness. He called Robert profoundly gifted, not only as an actor, but as a human being. He celebrated his baby brother's beautiful soul. The family wants that to be the lasting image. Not the pain, not the darkness, but the light he brought into their lives. Now, as they ask for privacy, they do so not out of distance, but out of necessity. Grief is intimate. It unfolds in quiet rooms and tearful embraces. It lives in shared stories and long nights of reflection. They are learning how to move forward while carrying his memory with them. Robert Carradine is survived by children who adored him, grandchildren who looked up to him, brothers, nieces, nephews, and countless friends who felt his generosity. The sorrow is deep. The loss is profound. Yet within that sorrow is also a fierce love, a commitment to honor his struggle, a determination to speak openly about mental health, and an enduring gratitude for the laughter, wisdom, and acceptance he gave so freely. In the end, for his family, he will always be more than a headline. He will be the father who showed up, the grandfather who knelt down to listen, the brother who offered steady counsel, the man whose light, even in difficult times, touched everyone around him. Long before the applause, before the premieres and festival spotlights, Robert Carradine's story began in the long shadow of a famous name. Born on March 24, 1954, he was the youngest son of John Carradine, a towering figure in classic Hollywood, a father whose presence on screen was as commanding as it was at home. Growing up in a family where acting was not just a profession, but a legacy, carried both privilege and pressure. He was the baby brother to David, Keith, and Christopher. Talented men, each carving out their own identities. In a household filled with scripts, rehearsals, and artistic intensity, Robert learned early what it meant to fight for attention, to be heard, to be seen not as the youngest Carradine, but as Robert. Sensitive by nature, he often retreated into observation, watching, absorbing, learning how emotion lived behind a pair of eyes. There were stories of instability, of a childhood that did not always feel secure. Fame can light up a stage, but it does not always warm a home. The unpredictability of an actor's life meant constant change. Shifting environments, emotional highs and lows that a young boy could not fully understand. That early sense of uncertainty shaped him. It made him deeply empathetic. It also left quiet scars. When his brother David encouraged him to audition for the Cowboys in 1972, Robert was barely out of his teens. Acting alongside John Wayne was not just a career opportunity, it was a test. David told him he had everything to gain and nothing to lose. But for Robert, it felt like everything was on the line. Stepping onto that set meant stepping into a world dominated by giants. He carried nerves he tried hard to hide, the fear of being dismissed as a novelty, the fear of failing publicly. He kept going. A year later, he appeared in Martin Scorsese's Mean Streets, then in Coming Home, directed by Hal Ashby, alongside Jane Fonda and Jon Voight. The performance was layered, quietly powerful. Some critics began whispering that he might be the finest actor among the Carradine brothers. It was praise, but it was also pressure. Expectations grew heavier. Every role became a comparison. Every success, a family headline. By 1980, he stood at Cannes with 2 films, The Big Red One and The Long Riders. The latter was a poetic idea brought to life by Walter Hill. Real brothers playing real outlaw brothers, Robert, Keith, and David, together as the younger brothers. On set, art and family blurred. There was pride in sharing the screen. There was also complexity. Old sibling dynamics do not disappear under studio lights. During that time, David fell in love with his horse, Zetan, and later brought him to live on Robert's property in the Hollywood Hills. It was a strangely tender chapter, a reminder that even in an industry driven by competition, there were moments of warmth. In the 1980s, if you drove along Mulholland Drive, you might have seen Robert's daughter, Ever Carradine, riding Zetan between home and Runyon Canyon. A cinematic image in real life, a father watching his child find joy in something simple and pure. Then came 1984, Revenge of the Nerds, Robert as Louis Skolnick. Awkward, brilliant, determined, the underdog who refused to be invisible. The role resonated because it mirrored something true inside him. He understood what it meant to feel underestimated, to fight quietly for dignity. The film became a cultural landmark, a franchise that defined a decade. For many, he became the face of lovable rebellion. Years later, he stepped into living rooms across America as the father on Lizzie McGuire. A softer presence, steady, reassuring, a different kind of hero. A new generation saw him not as a rebel, but as a guide. Perhaps that role reflected who he had become, a man who had weathered insecurity, who had navigated comparison and doubt, who had learned that strength does not always shout. Yet beneath the achievements was a lingering sadness that dated back to childhood, the ache of wanting stability, the quiet longing to be enough on his own terms. Success did not erase those early feelings, it simply layered over them. He worked tirelessly to build a life that felt grounded, to create for his children the steadiness he sometimes lacked growing up. Robert Carradine's beginnings were not simple. They were shaped by legacy, by expectation, by vulnerability. But from that fragile foundation, he built a career defined by authenticity. He was never the loudest presence in the room. He did not chase spectacle. Instead, he offered sincerity, humor with heart, performances that felt lived in. The sadness of his early years became the well from which he drew compassion. The uncertainty of his youth made him attentive to others. The pressure of a famous surname pushed him to find his own voice. And in doing so, he left behind a body of work that speaks not only to talent, but to resilience. Beyond the cameras and the characters, Robert Carradine carried passions that burned just as brightly as any spotlight. They were not carefully calculated career moves. They were pure, personal, rooted in joy. Music lived at the center of his heart. He never had formal training. He never learned to read sheet music. Yet, he picked up a guitar as if it were an extension of himself. The chords came by feel, by instinct, by emotion. Playing alongside his brothers Keith and David was not about perfection. It was about connection. Three siblings bound by blood and harmony, standing together under stage lights not as actors, but as musicians sharing something intimate. At the Sheridan Opera House in Telluride, Colorado, those nights became almost sacred. Robert and Keith both had homes there. The mountain air, the wooden stage, the closeness of the audience. It was a different kind of performance, stripped down, honest. The brothers returned again and again, not for fame, but for the simple thrill of making sound together, guitars blending, voices rising, old stories retold between songs. He also had the quiet honor of accompanying his childhood hero, Peter Yarrow, and folk legend, Ramblin' Jack Elliott. For Robert, standing beside them was surreal. As a boy, he had listened to their music with awe. As a man, he shared the stage with them. There was humility in that joy. He never pretended to be something he wasn't. He was a lover of music, grateful to be part of it. In the late 1980s, he and Mayor Winningham formed a band called the Waybacks. The name carried a sweetness that audiences adored. It came from Mayor's childhood memory of riding not in the front seat, not in the back, but in the way back of the family station wagon. That small, nostalgic detail became a symbol of simpler times, of childhood freedom. On stage, they told that story often. It never failed to draw smiles. Robert loved those moments, when laughter and melody blended into something warm and human. Yet if music was his refuge, racing was his fire. His fascination with speed began at just 11 years old, racing go-karts with fierce determination, engines roaring, tires gripping asphalt. It was not reckless energy, it was focus, control, precision. Over time, that childhood hobby grew into something far greater. By the late 1980s and into the 1990s, he was racing at the Grand Prix level. He even drove for Team Lotus alongside Paul Newman. On the track, there were no famous last names, no family comparisons, no critics, only the clock, the curve ahead, the discipline of mastering a machine. Robert often said racing was his true love because when you win a race, no one is better than you. It was a rare arena where achievement was undeniable, measurable, earned through nerve and skill alone. But even those powerful passions took second place to the role he valued most: father. In 1974, he welcomed his daughter, Ever Carradine, with Susan Snyder. For years, he raised Ever as a single dad. That commitment defined him. School mornings, bedtime talks, protecting her, encouraging her own dreams of acting. When she eventually followed a path into film and television, He understood the terrain she was walking. He offered guidance without pressure. In 1990, he met Edith Manny. Together they built a family and welcomed 2 more children, Marika and Ian. Robert balanced engines and guitars with homework and family dinners. He was present. He showed up, whether at a racetrack, on a small-town stage, or at home helping with life's everyday challenges. Those who knew him best saw a man fueled by curiosity, by the thrill of creation, by the hum of an engine and the vibration of strings beneath his fingers. His passions were not distractions from his life. They were expressions of it. Music gave him harmony. Racing gave him clarity. Fatherhood gave him purpose. And in those passions, perhaps more than anywhere else, Robert Carradine found the truest version of himself. For his niece, actress Martha Plimpton, the loss feels deeply personal, not distant, not public, not filtered through headlines. To her, Robert Carradine was never just a respected actor. He was Uncle Bobby, the favorite uncle, the one who showed up first and left last, the one whose laughter filled a room before anyone else even realized they needed it. Martha has often said he cherished that role more than any part he ever played on screen. Being an uncle was not ceremonial for him. It was active, intentional. He called, he visited, he asked real questions and waited for real answers. He wanted to know what his nieces were dreaming about, what they feared, what they were working toward, and he listened without judgment. Now, in the quiet after his passing, those memories feel sharper, more fragile. She remembers family gatherings where he drifted easily between generations, sitting on the floor with the kids, talking music with the adults, telling stories that were half wisdom, half punchline. He had a way of making everyone feel chosen, as if each person in front of him mattered completely in that moment. For Martha, the pain carries a particular ache. He was steady in her life. In an industry filled with unpredictability, Uncle Bobby felt grounded. He did not compete. He did not compare. He encouraged. When she faced challenges in her own career, he offered perspective, gentle advice, a reminder that identity is larger than any single role. She recalls how devoted he was to his grandchildren, Chaplin and Sam, Ever's children, little Jack, Marika's son. He was there at Little League games, clapping louder than anyone, at horse shows, standing proudly on the sidelines. He did not attend as a celebrity grandfather. He attended as a man completely in love with his family. He jumped at the chance to babysit, to read bedtime stories, to drive them to practice. Driving, that was his quiet love language. He adored taking people to and from the airport. It sounds small, ordinary. But to him it was sacred time, a private goodbye, a moment to ask, "Are you okay?" A final hug before departure. Martha now thinks about those drives differently, the comfort of knowing he would be waiting at the curb, the safety of his presence behind the wheel. He was all heart, she says, friends with anyone he met. From film sets to racetracks to neighborhood gatherings. He carried no grudges. If conflict arose, he let it go. Life was too short, he would shrug, offering that familiar half-smile. Kindness was not a performance for him. It was instinct. In her grief, Martha feels both sorrow and gratitude. Sorrow for conversations they will never finish, for holidays that will feel slightly dimmer, for the uncle who once felt indestructible. Gratitude for every ordinary afternoon he turned into something memorable, for the example he set of humor without cruelty, of acceptance without conditions. The sadness runs deep. It surfaces unexpectedly. In a song he loved, in the thought of an empty seat at the next family celebration. Yet even through tears, she holds tightly to the image of him laughing, of him bending down to meet a child at eye level, of him waving enthusiastically as someone boarded a flight. To Martha Plimpton, Robert Carradine was not defined by his struggles or even his achievements. He was defined by presence, by warmth, by the unwavering joy he took in being Uncle Bobby. And in that role, the one he cherished most, his love continues to echo through every generation he embraced. As we reflect on Robert Carradine's life, we are reminded that behind every familiar face on a screen is a human story, a story of dreams, struggles, victories, and quiet battles no one else can fully see. Robert gave the world laughter, he gave us heart, he gave us characters who made us feel less alone. Today, what he deserves most is compassion. Let us remember him not only for the roles that defined a generation, but for the courage it took to live authentically, for the love he poured into his family, for the honesty of his journey. His life teaches us something powerful. Talent is a gift, but kindness is a choice. Success is meaningful, but connection is everything. And even those who seem strong can be carrying invisible weight. If his story moves you, let it move you toward empathy. Check in on someone you love. Speak openly about mental health. Let go of grudges. Show up for family. Celebrate the people in your life while you can. That is a legacy worth carrying forward. Robert Carradine's light reached millions. Now it is up to us to keep that light alive through understanding and love. If you believe stories like this matter, please like this video. Share it with someone who grew up watching him. Subscribe to our channel for more reflections on the lives behind the legends. Together, we can honor the artists who shaped our memories and learn the deeper lessons their journeys leave behind.